What is going on? Welcome to episode 2 of a brand new series I am calling Remove the Douche. I'm Alan Betker, and this whole series is about diving into cultures and communities of things that we don't quite understand and finding out what exactly it is that makes them tick. It's totally ticking. Join me today as we dive further into the community of craft beer. Last time we talked about kind of what beer is, what defines craft beer. This time we're going to talk about what beer is on a scientific scale. Science. In today's series, we are going to talk about exactly what beer is. What makes up beer? What makes a beer beer? Now this might seem a little bit basic to you, but if you are here and watching this from episode 1, chances are you may not know what these seemingly simple definitions are. So we're just going to start from step, 2 now, and talk about what makes beer beer. And like I said in the last episode, I'm going to be trying a new beer every single time, or drinking a beer that I highly enjoy. Only one. Today's beer is from Ridgefield, Connecticut, out of a brewery called Nod Hill. It is called Geo Bunny. I've had a few of their beers before, and they are fantastic. Good lord, do they know how to make a good IPA. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, nicely done. Like I said, we are going to be talking about what makes beer beer, what composes beer, what makes beer taste like beer, kind of the fundamentals of the science of beer. We're not going to go crazy into it because it's very easy to go crazy into it. So let's start with the fact that all beer has 4 main ingredients. It has water, malt, hops, and yeast. I'm not going to explain what water is, but we are going to talk about malt, yeast, and hops. And what are those 3 things that make beer beer? So first of all, malt. Malt is just simply grain that is partially, for lack of a better word, sprouted. The actual term is called gestated, and that means it's partially on its way to becoming a plant. Let's just say plant infancy. And what they do is they stop that process and dry it out. And that creates just the right amount of starches and fermentable sugars to turn into alcohol. Now we're going to talk about how those turn into alcohol in a little bit. Third ingredient that's in beer, besides water and malt, is hops. Now, what are hops? Hops are a flower, pretty flowers, from a plant that is actually very closely related to marijuana. You know, the wacky tobacco, the devil's lettuce, the giggle bush. Now it's not, but it's very actually closely related to cannabis. But what that does is that they have these little flowers, these cones as they're called, and they dry these out, and these cones have different oils in them. And there are thousands of different varieties of these kinds of hops. Now these hops are added into the beer at a certain point when making it to make them taste different ways. For example, this beer has kinds of hops in it that make it taste kind of citrusy and juicy and a little bit maybe kind of earthy? Now I'm using words like this not because I've been in the scene for a long time, because that's genuinely how it tastes. And you will learn to taste things, and we're going to talk about how to taste things in a later episode. To sum up hops are just flowers with oils in them that make beer taste certain ways. The 4th and final ingredient in beer is the most important, because without it, you would not have beer. You would have tea. Now, the 4th ingredient is yeast. Now, you may be asking, but Alan, what is yeast? And I would say, please stop using that voice and I'll tell you. Yeast is simply a single-celled microorganism that eats the simple sugars that we get from malt. No, don't eat me. You know, the 2nd ingredient I mentioned. And then poops out ethanol. You know, the stuff that makes beer and alcohol delicious and wonderful and worth it. And just like that, we have all the ingredients that make up beer. So let's go over the 4 ingredients that make up all beer: water, malt, hops, and yeast. We're going to talk about all 4 of those later on down the line in more depth, so we understand kind of what makes up beer on a deeper scale. But that's essentially what craft beer is just beer made on a smaller scale with those 4 ingredients we just talked about. Thank you so much for joining me on a second episode of Remove the Douche. This is going to be a series that I'm going to be doing through various different cultures and communities. So we're going to kind of tear down the walls that kind of make those things seem a little bit more foreign and odd to us that we may not understand, so we can possibly get into these cultures a little bit more. I have been your host, Alan, and we will see you next time. Peace.